I'm Dr. Allison Hall, and with Naomi Lubin at Children's National, we continue to run monthly programming in the K Special Interest Group. And most of these programs are designed to help new or junior investigators identify the resources they need to be successful at GW and at Children's National. So we run these together as the institutions have slightly different foci. Today, I'm delighted that we have a group to talk about identifying research populations using the electronic health record. And we're going to talk about specific tools and maybe even people present at GW and Children's who can help you as investigators identify the study populations you need. Some of it's self-service and some of it requires analysts, and they'll help you think about that. I believe we're going with Dr. Liz Owens and Dr. George Sepulveda from GW first. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And then we'll switch over to talk about Children's next, and there'll be a lot of time for questions. So Liz?
Great. Thank you, everyone. I will set up our slides and Dr. Sepulveda will get us started. All right.
Yeah, so hi, everybody. Thanks for attending. We are the MFA analytics team, and I have the title of Chief Medical Analytics Officer. I'm a clinical pathologist and director of pathology informatics, and I do a lot of research with the electronic medical record. So we have sort of a different system here in that we have Epic in the MFA, the outpatient practice, and we have Cerner in the hospital, but we do get a lot of the Cerner data transferred to Epic if the patient goes to the hospital, if one of our patients goes to the hospital. So we can access quite a bit of data from the hospital. So in terms of analysis, we're going to talk about the tools that are available in Epic. And the general philosophy of the MFA has been that for analyzing data in our patients, we need to have a collaboration with a clinician that has access to Epic. And Liz is going to talk about a variety of tools that are available, with the biggest example being Slicer Dicer, which is a relatively user-friendly tool that requires minimal training and that anybody with access to Epic already has access to Slicer Dicer. So Liz, why don't you take it away?
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is me, Liz. This is before Epic, and now this is me after Epic. It's been a whirlwind adventure, and I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour today of
Can
some
you
of
put
our
your
tools.
slides in presentation mode, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Can I is the problem. It's hard to move things around because I have multiple desktops I have to go to here. Anyone know? I can't move this. Does anyone? I don't know if you guys
go
can
to
see.
the bottom tab. You can use that. You're currently on the leftmost bar. If you go to the rightmost one that looks like a screen. No, there almost. Keep going.
Before
Right.
the Zoom, yeah.
One more. There.
All right. I hope I can come back from this. Okay, great.
Right.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 4 primary self-service analytics tools, and like Dr. Sepulveda said, our main guiding principle is to get people to have the data in their own hands, but to work with an established clinician or expert to help them through it. End users do need to have an Epic account to access any of these tools, so there is a process for getting that access, and we can help you through that. We have a team of 5 business analysts that are available on staff to assist with, submitting your requests, learning the tools, getting the Epic access, and any custom analytics development that is needed as well. Sometimes when the tools can't capture everything, we can do some querying on the back end to help supplement that data. We also have a connection to a team of data scientists. I think I actually saw some of them on this call for more advanced analytical support. And then we have a SharePoint request site that coordinates review and approval of any research data requests through our Research Advisory Council. So a place to house the IRB approval and have the Research Advisory Council work through that and give us their approval. So these are the four main tools: dashboards, workbench, slicer dicer, which you'll hear the most about, and Cosmos, which you'll hear about as well. I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Watch my time here. So the first one, dashboards, is not really that useful for identifying populations. We'll cruise on over, but as you would guess, dashboards being a collection of visualizations or tools in Epic, they're very much organized around your role and your workflow. So for me, being in charge of, business intelligence, I want to see what's going on in the system in terms of reports, any errors, any, you can have color coding, graphs. I can see how often people are using the data and things like that. You can drill down into this as well. But again, it's very much a monitoring tool, so not as useful for identifying populations. Reporting workbench is very useful for identifying patients, but it is kind of complicated and quirky, but the real benefit of Workbench is that it's real-time data, it's live in the system, real-time data, and that it's actionable. So if you can pull up a query in Reporting Workbench that, this is an example of finding patients who are enrolled in research studies already. I've cut out the patient data so we don't see any of that, but you can then take action on that. I can find this list and I can add them to my own list. I can communicate, send a MyChart message or something like that, jump into their chart and do research, what have you. So it's real time in the system and does give you that layer of flexibility. It's very Excel looking and it has very limited summary and aggregation capability, which leads us to Slicer Dicer, which is sort of the best of all worlds. It is the best for identifying identifying populations and investigating different things. It is a visualization tool, but it also does have the ability to jump into a detail view. You, as researchers in general, our philosophy is that we let people see aggregated data for everyone. You can see that I'm on all patients here, and I'll jump into this in a minute, but you can only see the details for your own patients. But the beauty of Slicer Dicer is that, you can slice and dice it, as it's saying, by any number of factors here. There's all these preset factors of diseases and lab results and demographics and different things like that. So you can set a base population, slice and dice it to your heart's content. And then there's also predefined measures. So maybe I'm just looking to make sure I have enough patients that meet a specific set of criteria. So I'm just returning number of patients, but I could just as easily return an average age in years or something like that. So I'll show you that in just a moment. But so it's really the best way to kind of, all right, what if I cut it this way? How many patients are there then? How many patients have we seen in the last year? That kind of thing. It's at your fingertips to aggregate and slice and dice and really make sure you have enough of a cohort in the system already ready for you. This is just MFA data. It's, whatever goes in our system is what's available in here. Which leads me to our last tool, which Dr. Sepulveda will talk more about, which is Cosmos, which is kind of like very similar to Slicer Dicer. You'll see the look and feel of it, but it is de-identified data from hundreds of organizations that participate, Epic organizations that participate and contribute to this. And it really has hundreds of millions of patients in there. And you do have to apply for access to this. You have to have the Epic account for this. And it has levels of use from just a regular end user doing the slicer and dicer up to a data scientist role where you can actually get, SQL or R access or something a little more advanced to this data. So I know that was very fast, but I just want to give you, this overview of the tools. If I can do this, we'll try to really quickly see if I can get this out of the way. You know what? I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing. It's because, again, I'm on multiple desktops. So sometimes the jumping and back and forth between the desktops doesn't work. Okay, so just have a couple minutes here, and I just want to show you live in the system kind of the beauty of Slicer Dicer. So here's that screenshot we saw, but number of patients, but I could take advantage of some of these measures and say like, no, I'm actually looking for like the average in years, and you can see how easy it makes it. It's got all of these measures predefined. Now I'm looking at just the average in years, and maybe I then don't want to slice by years. Maybe instead I want to slice by chief complaint or something. And it's going to let me grab like the top 100 chief complaints for this group. And maybe I say, actually, I only want to see, this is way too much data. I only want to see those who have Parkinson's, or gastritis. Obviously, that makes no sense pairing those things together, but you can start, you can start whittling it down in your slices, and you can look at it different ways. And I could say, wait, I can't even read this. I'm going to switch to a different bar graph or to a different type of visualization. Obviously, this is, again, way too much data and not really helpful at this point, but I just want to show you how easy it is.
Driving, because I want to see this. Oh, sorry.
Is that a question? I couldn't quite hear. Okay. So I just want to really quickly show you how easy it is. Maybe I'm looking for, patients who are taking a statin. I can type in statin. It's already saying like, are you looking for, statin not tolerated, or statins in their allergies, or things like that, or whether you're really looking to see if they're taking it. It's going to prompt you with more intuitive or more common language things to help you get to what you need. So I'm going to say I'm looking at patients from diabetics who are on a statin therapy, that kind of thing. So now we're really going to cut down on our I'm going to take away that. That's not very helpful. Cut down on our number of patients here, and the average age of those patients is 60. Maybe I just want to see the number of patients, how many patients fall into that, less than 2,500. Maybe, all right, I only want to see patients with an ED diagnosis of diabetes who had that statin therapy. No one. So just on and on, all different things you can do here. And we talked about, our concept is to give everyone aggregate access to all patients. But if you do want to see the details, you're going to end up only seeing your own patients unless we give, special access and approved request for that. So you can look at this data by all patients or by my patients. You can only see the details for your own patients unless we give you special dispensation. So I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you, but that's kind of really all of my time. So I just want to stop and let Dr. Sepulveda jump in to kind of round out the talk on Cosmos.
So Liz, can I interrupt you for just a section? There's a discussion going on in the chat.
Oh, okay.
One of the questions was, how do you get to Slicer Dicer?
Great question. All right. So if you have Epic Access already, the easiest way to get to Slicer Dicer is to use the jump menu, this magnifying glass on the right-hand upper corner by your login name. If you click on that and type Slicer Dicer, it will bring up the module. Oops. And then Slicer Dicer is organized by, I'm already in it, so it's kind of not making a very good, there we go. We'll do it. Slicer Dicer brings up the activity, and Slicer Dicer data is divided into different data models. The one I was using is one of our most popular, just patients, everything about patients. But we also have things like a transactions data model, which is related to charges, or you can see, prescription feed. Not everybody has all of the models. It depends on what's relevant to you, but patients and visits are some of the most popular ones. We do have research studies and research study patient associations as well. So you pick your model and you go into that, and then what filters and slices and measures are available is based on what model you're in. So if you're in transactions, you're going to have measures like total charges or total payments. Whereas if you're in patients, you're going to have measures like the count of the patients or the average age or things like that.
A second clarification, there are several questions about who has access to Epic. And I assume that that's a GW-based physician.
Yes, it's anyone who works for the MFA, I believe, gets access by default based on your role and your duties. If you're from the GW side or from somewhere else, we have to go through the onboarding approval process for Epic. But the address we included, solution center at mfa.gwu.com, is a good place to start. We can get the right people to sign off on your access request, but we would just need to get an account set up within Epic if you don't have one already.
Okay, to clarify, somebody at Children's could have access to this?
Dr. Sepulveda, do you want to take that in? I don't know this arrangement and what's allowed, so I don't know the answer to that.
Probably not. Probably you want to collaborate with somebody that has access.
Okay. All right. And then Hiroki wants to look at urea cycle disorders, but I think we have to do that later.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Sepulveda.
Okay, so I'll just share my screen. So Cosmos is an Epic product, as Liz mentioned. And let me see. I'm just going to share the desktop. So do you see the Cosmos?
Yes.
Okay. So you can access Cosmos with some minimal training if you have access to Epic. And then there's been some online training you can do, and you'll have access to this Cosmos portal. So when you log into Cosmos, you will see this portal, and you can see that this is a large database right now. It has 226 million patients. Here's some distributions of diseases. And registry participation, for example, we have 14 million diabetic patients, type 2 diabetic patients. Here's the race distribution between Cosmos and the US Census. And then we have slice and dice. So everybody with Cosmos portal access will also have accesses to slice and dicer. And I won't repeat what Liz has done, so I will just load a previous session that I did. So you see the number of patients, we have 226 million. So this one is just looking at patients with congestive heart failure. It does take a little bit to run. So in the meantime, I'll show you other features. So data dictionary, in here you can look at all the tables that are available, and you can look at all the features of the tables. And then there's the data science model. So to have access to data science, in addition to have access to Cosmos portal, you have to do an online or in-person course that takes about 2.5 days, and then there's an exam, and then you get certified. And it's mostly SQL based, but you also have access to data science tools, which I'm going to show here. For example, this is our studio. I can show you an example of what we can do. So this one uses both R and SQL to get access to the data. This is a particular report of a study that I'm doing in collaboration with a researcher group, Dr. Mazumdar group at GW. So this is looking at pre-diabetes response to low carbohydrate diet. So we go through a lot of code and data tables, and then you can produce graphs. For example, this is a nice distribution of all the tests done for these patients, and so on. And then you can, this is some statistics on the difference between those that responded and those that not. And we're trying to run a predictive model on which patients would respond or which would not, using machine learning. So this is actually running live, the predictive model, and you should get the results. Here's already the statistics of the predictive model, and then you get a decision tree visualization, for example. Here it is, feature importance. So that's how quickly you can run the model in the data science server. So going back to our slicer dicer, here is one where we selected all patients and then sliced by sex, race, and ethnic group. So this is useful, for example, to submit grant applications for this data. If I want to see all the medications, that the top 20 medications that these patients are on, these are the top medications, and we'll soon have the respective data. So in a nutshell, yeah, so here it is. So the top medications for furosemide, 45% of the patients are on. You can get more data as you hover over it. And yeah, so I think this is just a brief overview of what's possible with Cosmos. And I'd be happy together with Liz to answer any questions.
Hiroki has his hand up.
So what can you get row level data exported out of this virtual desktop interface?
Well, the short answer is no, but you can ask them to export some of the data, the aggregate data. This is a de-identified population, so you can work with the line data. That's what we do here. But this is all enclosed on a server. You don't even have access to internet or anything. You cannot export anything. So you have your own folders here you can use. And for example, this HTML file that I was showing, that since it doesn't have any patient information, I think they would approve it. I haven't asked them yet. This is mostly aggregated data. There's no individual patient data, so they would probably allow me to get this, so then we can submit for papers and stuff like that.
Yep, exactly. I have one more question. What sort of, are you able to also run R as well as Python, or?
Yeah, this is all done in R. So
all in R.
Yeah.
And if you happen to have a specific package or module that you wanted to use, how do you bring that into the VDI?
We have to ask them. So, you know, here we have quite a few number of packages that are useful for data analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a series of packages that are already loaded. But if you really want some, you ask them, and they, you know, in like a month or two, they will go through an approval process. They check the package for issues, and then they will allow you to use it. I did
this
ask
is really,
for a few myself.
this is really cool, and it's like a zippy, you know, they've given you actually a really high performing VDI compared to some other places.
Oh,
what
yeah.
I also noticed is that you have about 200 million people. There's something similar called the Cerner Learning Health Network that has, last I checked, about 150 million people. But I'm pretty sure that between Cerner and Epic, you know, we're only covering about what, 75% of the population in the country. So somewhere there must be overlap.
There must be overlap, of course. Patients go to multiple places. A good example is our own GW hospital and the MFA. We cover probably most of the patients in both.
I see. Yeah.
That was actually a question in the chat. So I want to make sure that we don't leave our audience in the dust with some of the discussions between the experts. One of the questions for the group was, does Slicer, Dicer, and Cosmos actually connect with Cerner? And I think, George, you were arguing that many of the patients, at least at GW, who are in the outpatient MFA environment may, when they're hospitalized, obviously interact with Cerner, and some of that information can come back into Epic. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
You get all access of that patient once they visited the hospital? Should we be sending all the patients to the hospital?
Well, the patients that go to the hospital, most of their data, such as labs and diagnoses and things like that, do cross over to Epic.
Okay.
So that's how we can get some of the data, but it's obviously not as good as having access to Cerner data directly.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask Liz, maybe you can put in the chat the solutions email contact information that you mentioned earlier for people on the call to figure out if they can get access to Epic or potentially a collaborator. This really does look like a pretty GW centric solution, and we wanted to give Hiroki a chance to talk about how many of the folks at Children's are also accessing the electronic health record and pluses and minuses of the systems there. So Hiroki, let's move on to you.
All right.
And Liz has put the email solution center at mfa.gw.edu in the chat.
Is this thingy blocking the view of the screen somehow?
Looks fine to us.
Okay, all right, well, then, so you have my email up here, hiroki@gw.edu is the shortest form of my email and easy to keep track of, so use that if you are trying to reach me. And why is this not advancing? So, basics, everyone knows this. What is the electronic health record? It's a tool-first approximation electronic version of the paper chart, and it captures all this information, but it's not just the data like this. The goal, even though it is to capture the evidence needed to make the decisions about patient care, it doesn't always do a great job of that. And the other part of it is to provide the workflow management so that requests get sent to different parts of the operation or organization. So, it's like, okay, we have a patient, we've seen them, send them to the lab to get this test done, that test done, go to x-rays to get x-rays done. And so we have lots and lots of varied data, huge volume, huge variety. And these things all intersect. And this is part of the reason why these tools that like Slicer, Dicer, Cosmos, and what I'm going to touch on are complicated. And that's why there's this need for this kind of much more self-service approach. They are complicated because the way that people traditionally organize data, these traditional relational databases, they get really unwieldy. Between Epic and Cerner, I think about 75% of the U.S. population hospitals are using one of those two EHR vendors. Epic is definitely in the lead in this country, and Cerner is used at GW Hospital and Children's National. That little thing there with all these little boxes, every one of those little squiggles that you can see there is a column in a table, and these tables are all interconnected. This is only a small fraction of the number of tables within the Cerner Millennium database. Last time I looked, there's about 30,000 tables in there. And you have to do these things called joins. On the right, you can see examples of joins between encounters and all these different terms in these other tables that have to be connected for you to actually get meaningful information showing up on your screen. So knowing how to do this actually takes quite a bit of training. However, if you can mine this stuff, you start to find these patterns, and that's why we're all here. We're interested to try to see if we can develop a computational phenotype that really describes a disease or a population. And if you have the right permissions and knowledge, you really have a lot of insights available to you. Now, the other thing that happens is that these EHRs are heavily customized from site to site. So, you learn Cerner at your medical school or your first hospital, and you go to another Cerner site, yeah, there's a lot of overlap, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna know how to use the same Cerner vendor provided EHR at the next place. And so there's challenges, other sorts of challenges that show up that require you to do a lot of legwork before you even start encountering a research project, include things like ensuring privacy, knowing that some data elements are going to be restricted. Data can be scattered across systems. For example, I'll have a picture in 2 slides. Your PACS data, the X-ray data. Yunhee knows about this. Data for X-rays is locked away somewhere else. There's a pointer somewhere in the EHR, and then you have to go learn how to use yet another system in order to actually see things properly. And then some of the data wrangling that's necessary, which data wrangling is actually a technical term that you're going to become familiar with. It really means organizing and reshaping the data so that you can actually do the analyses. Other things that can happen is that different devices may use different units for measurements. And so you got a number, 110. 110 what? Mgs per kg, mgs per square meter, or what, kilograms per whatever. Those are not always immediately adjacent to the data in these tables, and that can also mean things get more difficult. The data has huge variety, and a lot of the really important data is in unstructured fields, in clinical notes. The other thing you should also know is that the electronic health record, think about children's, we've got however many thousand people here, they're all entering data into the EHR. Now I could go into the back end and run a database query that is really complicated and completely eat up the database performance. So at Children's, we have Millennium Power Chart. Now Cerner was acquired by Oracle last year, and all these things are undergoing renames. So at Children's, we also use BearTrax, Power Chart, and Millennium interchangeably. So be aware of that. Now within the EHR, there is a reporting tool called Discern. To use that, you need to know something that is related to the database language structured SQL. And it's really not great for looking across a cohort. It is better suited for looking at an individual patient's record. Now, what I was telling you about where the data systems are, this is a really old slide of some of the systems that all feed together through a unified interface called Cloverleaf that transforms some of the data. And then at the very bottom, things get dropped into Cerner, into Millennium for use. And so things at any place could break and bad things happen. But all these steps can also mean that sometimes data gets, errors creep into the data too. Now, we have something called an enterprise data warehouse. And here, what it does is it takes this data from Cerner and lets you work with this. Now, in the Cerner, in the children's intranet, there is a job aid that lets you get access to this healthy analytics data warehouse. Where things are located in the internet keeps on changing, so that's why I couldn't find a good URL that I trust isn't going to change in the next month. But if you do a search for Discern, you'll find this group called the IS Learning Clinical Informatics. And from there, there's the instructions on what you need to do to get your network ID so you have access. Once you've done that, then you can go to Children's National Analytics healthyintent.com and you can actually see the Healthy Intent user interface. It was originally a population health platform. It does not contain notes, images, or PDFs. And the identifiers still remain in the data. It's not de-identified. So that means also you're probably going to have to work with the IRB or ask analysts to do the data, initial data queries for you so that you can work with this. Otherwise, you're going to need an IRB. Now, the good thing is that the data are normalized, and so all lab units have been converted to something that is uniform across the data system. And you're also able to create custom data sets that are secured, that are not visible by other people outside of whoever you designate. And those can be automated as reporting tools. So you can have the same report updated on a weekly or daily basis as you need. You have some tools, business objects or Tableau, if you're familiar with those. Otherwise, SQL is really the best way to go here. And so you will probably want to get analyst support, and I have links in here for where you can find this analyst support and or request an ongoing data extract. There are ongoing trainings available at Children's National on how to use healthy analytics. So counterparts to Slicer Dicer and Cosmos, which I'm really jealous of because, it's got great performance features. Cerner has something called Healthy Data Lab. No, actually, Cerner, they're renaming it again because it's now Oracle something or other. We had it for a while, and then people broke it. So I've been pushing to have IT restore this service. Right now, they're doing some network routing issues that they haven't chased down, but hopefully within the next few weeks, this will be back up and running again. It's something called Jupyter Notebook, which is another type of compute environment. It's not as slick as our Shiny or our Studio, but it works quite well. And it is a front end where you can then run queries in Python and R against the Healthy Intent data lake. But it also can search something called Cerner Real World Data. And Cerner Real World Data is analogous to Cosmos. It is a compilation of all the different Cerner Healthy Intent sites around the country. So about 150 million patients are covered inside Cerner Real World Data. And that one is de-identified. So you can actually do queries like that across the country and start to see global trends as well. There's also a separate network called the Learning Health Network that also provides access to CRWD. And it's similar in concept to another pediatric-focused collaboration consortium that Children's is part of called PedsNet. You do need a front door request where you say, my goal is to study this, and then they'll approve it, usually within about 24, 48 hours. Right now, we only have 3 seats at a time. So the people that want to use real world data are going to have to talk with each other and negotiate when they're going to actually do the work in there and get the requests. But these tools really do require familiarity with Python, R, or other types of packages for working with large data sets. So this is something that we have to really start training a little bit more on, or increasing our analyst resources available for this. So this brings us to something called Trinetics that we also have had at Children's for quite a while now. This one is self-service. It is very much analogous to Slicer Dicer. And you can use this as preparatory research. It's cloud-based. You have the options of querying just Children's, various United States sites, or even now they've expanded to international sites. And the cool thing is that the interface is very, very clean, easy to use, takes you about half an hour to learn. And you can search across CPT codes, ICD-10 codes, these different kinds of coding systems that get used all the time. Demographics, diagnoses, medications, procedures, visits, labs, all of this stuff. Now, the really cool thing is for the Cerner, for the data in Trinetics that is coming from just Children's, we do have the ability to link back to Healthy Intent. And if you have the approved IRB protocol, we can actually then extract the Healthy Intent ID numbers, connect them to what we found in Trinetics, and then get you a cohort from our data warehouse. So this sort of linkage between a really easy to use self-service environment to one that has, all the data from Children's is really, really powerful, And so the user interface looks a little bit like this. It's you log in, create a new study, click on the blue button over there to the right, and you can do these studies. So this one, urea cycle disorders, because they're important, familiar to me. And so I started putting in words, urea cycle, and then it came up and gave me 3 options. So I did an OR, Boolean join, and said, we must have these things. And so I'm just doing the search within Children's National, not across the country. And it says 240. And then of those, let's see what the demographics look like. Okay, this is sort of distribution. Some of these actually might be bona fide people. They might be parents of kids or carriers, because we do see them. I have found some dates that were way out here in the 90s plus that I suspect someone actually put in the wrong century in the front end of the date. So you actually just start to find out that not all the data is absolutely perfect either. Racial demographics, gender demographics show up. You can also start to say, what are the most common diagnoses associated with these 240 patients? And what sort of things start to line up? And each one of these things you can click open and drop down and see more details. What sort of procedures have been seen? Have happened? What kind of medications are they on? But then the other cool thing is you can ask, how often am I likely to see another patient over the next year. And you can actually look at this. Now, where this becomes really powerful is that Trinetics is also used by pharmaceutical companies and CROs, and they can do an aggregate query across the entire country and then come back and say, you know, we're trying to build up a clinical trial. Would you like to participate? And we've actually had quite a bit of success with people coming in and participating as part of a clinical trial or multi-site clinical trial this way. There are other additional kinds of analyses that are possible through looking at prevalence, comparing cohorts. And so some of the groups that we work with have been starting to use this to write papers. This is enough to actually get quite a bit of analysis done quite easily. And so to request Trinetic access, there's a URL here, and there's tons of training materials online. Children's also has other networks available for research. PedsNet is one. This is right now a dozen pediatric focused hospitals around the country. Their data, we also contribute to them. And that one is very carefully curated. There's actually a paper being generated right now comparing the PedsNet data versus the Trinetics data in terms of the level of data scrutiny that happens before this data becomes available for mining, for research. N3C is the National COVID Cohort Collective. We also contribute to that by taking our Trinetics data and then pushing it through to N3C. So this is all de-identified data. N3C has been actually it's generated lots and lots of papers in the last couple of years around COVID. And they're actually thinking now about using this as a model for studying other disorders, because essentially N3C was a way for hospitals to realize that sharing data was not a bad thing, that it could be done in a safe and secure manner. So now, instead of looking at COVID, you could start looking at other diseases. FIS, Children's contributes to that. PICORNet is like a superset of PedsNet. Then we have groups like All of Us and UK Biobank that Children's are able to sign on to and get accounts. I have an account on UK Biobank and All of Us because right now those are probably some of the richest sources of genomic data for patients. There's about 200,000 in All of Us, and I think the UK Biobank just said we have now 500,000 UK genome sequences available for research. So lots of places to go. You can also visit the CTSICN Research Launcher and ask for help. For Cerner specific things, there's lots and lots of training material inside the ULearn site. GW actually offers every year, 3, 4, 5 really, really phenomenal workshops for Python and R. And they've been very generous, allowing children's faculty and staff to participate and join in there as part of their data carpentry groups. I can only say great things about this library feature. And the other thing they offer is a subscription to O'Reilly online learning, which is, O'Reilly is a publisher that publishes really, really good technical books on compute and informatics of all sorts. And you can go there and get access to these books. And these books cost like 40, 50 bucks a pop. So, here you have access to 10,000 of them. Awesome. Children's also has a special interest group called Docs in Data Science. I convinced Anita Patel and Kenny McKinley at Children's to lead it. And so they run with this, and they try to hold weekly sort of training sessions as well as discussions around topics that interest physician scientists with data science and what they have to learn. Both of them have spent quite a bit of time teaching themselves the basics of R, Python, SQL in order to work with data, and they're happy to share this information. So we hope to expand this to GW. GW Coders is something that actually runs out of, I think, GSET, the Graduate School of Education at GW. And there, Ryan Watkins has undergrads and grad students coming in, meeting regularly. You may find that this is an opportunity to find students that are looking for capstone projects to work with. And if you forget all of this, just remember my email, send me email, and I'll be happy to talk more.
Great, thank you. So there's a question in the chat, Hiroki, does All of Us or UK Biobank allow access to clinical and genetic data?
It does. The quality of the All of Us clinical data is mixed because people volunteer what they want to share. So it's not as full, like not everyone, there's lots and lots of holes in the data, I think is the best way to think about it. But the underlying pool of the underlying population is quite large, so that's useful. Some of these other tools might be better for the combined clinical and genomic data, genetic data.
Okay.
And
Are
you
there
can-
questions from the group? I've been trying to ask the ones that are in the chat. Anyone want to ask a question directly of our experts here? Can I ask a question of Liz and George? Do you have regular training for slicer dicer, or is it on the investigator to figure it out him or herself?
You're on mute, please.
I muted myself. We do have analysts available for one-on-one trainings. We are working on setting up some regular like lunch and learns. We were trying to get a few things settled first, but we do look forward to doing that. But for now, just contact us and we're happy to set up a one-on-one session or group session, whatever anyone needs.
Mhm.
We also have some
anybody-
training videos and things
Yeah.
like that we could
Yeah,
share with
that's
people.
what I was gonna say. Anybody with an Epic account can access what's called the Galaxy, which is a wide repository of documents, including training documents, and there's some very nice ones for introduction to slicer dicer and other cogito tools.
Yeah, there can often be a learning curve that's a little bit daunting with some of this stuff. So it might be useful to do that.
And the cool thing is that in about a year or so, we're going to have a generative AI-driven slicer dicer. Epic, as soon as ChatGPT came out, started working with OpenAI, and they are making incredible progress. I've seen some demonstrations of this where you just say, hey, Epic, show me, heart failure patients, top 20 medications broken down by race, and it will just give you the answer. So you don't even have to know anything but talk to it. So that will be coming soon. But in the meantime, you do need some training.
Well, but also you can train yourself by asking the code to generate that query. And you use the query, modify it, and then kind of you learn the process by using that AI.
Yeah. Exactly. So these AIs will generate a SQL. I didn't show that, but every time you run a slicer dicer, it generates a SQL dynamically as you make changes, and you can copy this SQL. So if you have access to the data science tools, you can then take the SQL and modify. So the same thing will happen with AI-generated queries.
Also, I would like to add that care needs to be taken, not really 100% 100% trust the SQL code given by the AI. It's a starting point.
Absolutely. That's one reason why they haven't come out yet with the product. It's still in validation phase, but it's not your regular ChatGPT. It's much more validated and with a lot better outcomes.
I have a sort of future-minded question. Does anybody know what system will be used at Cedar Hill? Because both of our institutions will be participating there.
Yeah. Since it's a UHS hospital, UHS, which is the corporation that owns not children's, GW Hospital, is a large Cerner network. So it's very unlikely that they will convert to Epic anytime soon. That would be, hundreds of millions of dollars they would have to
The
spend.
Children's is already on Cerner, so that would be consistent for those users.
Yes.
Okay.
Not that they would necessarily be able to cross the data, but that's the other thing I would like to mention is with appropriate access and IRB approval, if you have access to line data, then you can, for our own institution, not for Cosmos, but for our own institution, you can download the data and then use it and join data from different sources.
And so, Allison, I think I will have to work with you again to get that data use agreement back in
Yeah.
place. Because,
My understanding is that's moving forward, but you and I should talk offline about that. So that's,
yeah, because then that way we actually would have the data sources available in safe, secure regions for everyone to work with across sites.
across both our sites. I want to mention to the visitors today that there is a satisfaction survey in the chat. Please give us your feedback. If there is something you'd like to, and Pesha's just put it back in to remind us, if there are sessions you would like us to add or do next, please let us know. And if there are things you would like to see about today's session, we'd be happy to hear from you as we go on planning. Are there other questions?
Just to let the group know that we have plans coming up, something on budget prep for a K and an R award, as well as a mentorship program. And those are future and in the planning.
Well, even closer than that, the January session for the K-SIG is another collaborative project between GW and Children's. We're having members of the Cancer Center come and talk about accruing to cancer clinical trials. So this is including Julie Bowman, Pavani Chalasani, and Arang Kim at Children's. So this is a sense to get the cancer folks thinking a common language as well. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for the presenters for telling us a bit more about how to handle the EHR at each of our institutions. And you can tell everybody wants to look at both of them. So we have a few other things we need to do better. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.